What's up, everybody? Thursday night, day 3 in the books of the Gwyneth Paltrow ski accident trial. I have some mixed feelings here, right? And I think today was an interesting set of witnesses, and the testimony that came in I thought was interesting. The defense's strategy is very clear at this point, and especially the way it's being presented by Attorney Owens. We're going to get to that. We're going to talk about what I think about this strategy. And while you can disagree with the strategy or not like the way something is coming across or think that something doesn't actually prove what they're trying to make it prove, without necessarily thinking the plaintiff is hitting home runs or crushing this case. So that's going to be something we're going to wade in the water today. A lot of you had questions on Twitter. A lot of you will have questions tonight. I will try to get to all of those at the end, as I always do, and throughout, of course. But hit that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe to our page. If you guys are not subscribed, hit that reminder bell to join us for these recaps every night as long as the trial goes, which is supposed to be 8 days. But we were supposed to get to Terry Sanderson, the plaintiff, today, and we didn't. And Gwyneth Paltrow is supposed to testify tomorrow, but it seems like we are a bit behind schedule, which is, as you followed any trial, not uncommon. Most trials do get behind schedule. But just as an overarching theme, as we started the day today with Dr. Fong and her testimony by video, there were some objections. There was, I think, a ruling at the beginning of the trial that surprised the plaintiffs a little bit, where the judge limited her testimony. I don't think they were ready for that. And it shows you how difficult it is to prepare trials like this, to prepare depots by video, to have them edited, to have certain things in and out. And then now when a ruling comes kind of at the last minute, maybe something you didn't expect, or whether you expected it or not, you had to get this video depot ready. She was not going to present in person at trial. Now you've got to mute and fast forward and do all this weird stuff, as we saw when the depot was being presented, that is not good for the side presenting that depot. So we do try to limit the video depots that we play, and we try to protect against boring the jury. And a lot of you said, I just can't watch this. It's so boring. It's so much of the same stuff. It's so repetitive. And I think that is an issue that they're going to run into when you have an 8-day trial. Most civil trials can be done within a week, whether that's 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. Sometimes there are major brain injuries, severe brain injuries. Sometimes there are deaths. Sometimes there's a lot of lost wage information or loss of capacity to earn. There are life care plans, which I don't know if we're going to have one in this case, which show exactly what has to be proven in the future as to the treatment that is needed for this person. That can sometimes take a while. So you have to try to pare it down, get your best evidence in front of this jury, and explain the case in a way that is easy for them to follow. And like I said, usually you want to start with somebody that explains the accident, which they did in this case. Then at some point, either early or late, you want to bring the B&A witnesses, how this accident and these injuries affected that person. They did this. Then you want to bring out the medical testimony, which they're doing now. And then eventually they want to hear from the plaintiff, which they are going to do. So I don't think they've gone overly slow in the case, but it has seemed a little bit clunky, and some of these videos can be boring if we are not careful. And here's where I think their biggest problem is. Way too much arguing back and forth with the other lawyer, way too many pauses and delays and things like that they should try to avoid. Now, Gwyneth Paltrow's lawyer, I think, is baiting them into it a little bit, and they feel like they do have to respond to that, which is fine. But I want you to try to understand how difficult it is to present a case like this, put this video stuff together. It's frustrating when witnesses can't come in person, but everybody's got a life. Everybody's got a job. These trials take a long time, as you see in this case, 7 years to get to trial. So you got to get it done when you can. So Dr. Fong, the neuropsychologist, she was part of the TB12 clinic, which I thought was interesting, the concussion arm of that, which people could love or they could hate, depending on their feelings of Tom Brady. She does again, and I think they have and this is also something that we talk about, and we try to limit it. If we have a good witness, again, if you shorten the trial, you have one good witness hit it, usually that's good. They have had every witness explain to us the difference between mild, moderate, and severe concussions. They've had every witness read through the same medical records, the same scans, the same diagnosis, the same thoughts that some other doctor had. And I don't know if I feel like that's effective. I would use these individual experts for one specific thing. And this neuropsychologist is the treating physician for Terry Sanders, and that's what I would have focused on. The treatment. What did you do? Why did you do it? What did he present with? Why are you picking the treatment that you're picking? You say he needs future treatment. What future treatment does he need and why? Okay. And I mean, I think she did do a good job of saying that a mild brain injury or mild concussion does not mean that the symptoms are mild. I thought that was a good explanation on her part. And she also, again, did a great job of using the bad facts or turning the bad facts or explaining, I should say, the bad facts to how they're actually good for the plaintiff, where she said he has risk factors, his prior mental health history and the structural findings of NPH, while they were not symptomatic, they do make it more likely that he would be injured in a traumatic event. That is very important. We've already talked about that eggshell plaintiff stuff. We've hit that. And I thought she did a good job explaining that and whether or not he's going to recover. He's been treating with her for 6 years, it sounds like, still having issues. She's an eternal optimist, but it seems like at this point, he's not going to recover, at least completely. So it is a permanent injury. He did come to her 1.5 years after the crash. She does not feel like he was malingering at all. He did show up and give it his best effort. And I thought it was funny because when you do these videotape depositions, you go back and forth with the other side. They object to this, you object to that. They pull out certain parts that are irrelevant if you have to repeat a question sometimes. They left in Owens, Gwyneth Paltrow's lawyer, again saying, I literally laughed out loud when he's like, hey, just so you know, I need enough time to cross this witness, make sure I have enough time. The same thing he's been doing in this trial. So if the jury is going to hold Gwyneth Paltrow's lawyer against her, they're giving them every opportunity to. Now, will it be enough? Who knows? I would never rely on that. There are lots of snarky, jerky defense lawyers with bad attitudes and bad jury appeal, in my opinion. But if the jury does not believe your client, then it doesn't really matter. And witness credibility is everything is the title of today's video, because that's where I land at the end of the day. That is absolutely where I land at the end of the day. So then let's get to one part I thought was really interesting. Some judges will allow it, some will not. The commenting on the other side's experts. And that's the first clip we're going to play today, is what Dr. Fong thinks of the defense experts in this case. And that's been a big theme, right? They've been differentiating treaters versus experts, which I think is important. They've also differentiated whether or not you need to meet with the client. More on that later. But let's hear what she thinks about the quote-unquote hand-picked experts of the defense.
2 neuropsychologists, Dr. Eastfold and Dr. Ustin. You've reviewed the defense's hand-picked experts, including 2 neuropsychologists, Dr. Eastfold and Dr. Askenazi. What are your responses to their opinions, or at least in their reports?
I mean, they have a lot of opinions in their reports. But again, I want to just emphasize that there's a really big difference between going over someone's chart in another state across the world and actually having that patient in front of me, dejected, crying, helping them. I think it's really easy to criticize someone from that far away, and it's a totally different beast when you're in the trenches with that patient trying to get them out. They have a lot of opinions that I think show that they're not concussion experts, that they're not traumatic brain injury specific persistent post-concussion experts. And I think if I'm being totally honest, a lot of their opinions are easily refutable. If not most of their opinions are easily refutable by just going online and looking at the CDC recommendations for clinicians and how to treat concussions.
So basically, you can Google things that make it easily refutable for what the defense experts are going to say. That's very confident, and I like a confident expert. We will see how that goes when the defense experts actually have their opportunity to testify, but she comes out swinging at the defense experts. So here's a question I have for the chat. Do you differentiate, and if so, how do you differentiate treaters, meaning treating physicians, somebody like Dr. Fong or a radiologist that just happens to read an MRI, versus a quote-unquote hired gun type of expert? Do you differentiate at all? Somebody that's actually meeting with the client, treating the client, trying to get the client better, versus somebody that's just looking through all the records to try to find ways to make the client look like a liar, or make it look like the client, had pre-existing conditions, or is paid to find something wrong with the client's case or the patient's case. Do you differentiate?
Okay.
With all due respect, but they do not. I just do not.
One of my favorite lines is all due respect.
That they're seeing him as an individual and as someone that is really suffering and has suffered and has done everything in their power to try to get better.
Do you have, or what examples do you have of their opinions that you disagree with, if you can recall right now.
Yeah, well, one of the big ones is that they don't think that he has post-concussion symptoms. I don't know if they just don't believe it exists or whatnot, but, you know, I mean, it's interesting because I believe all the experts agree, defense and plaintiffs, that he had a concussion.
So she says that's a big line right there. All experts agree, defense and plaintiff, that he had a concussion. A lot of you are saying the treater holds more weight. Both have their purpose. I agree with that. Absolutely. I think there is a space for the expert to come in and review the records and give their opinion. But I would put more weight on the treater as well, because they are there for the most part to help the client, not just for litigation. And as she said, and any treating physician will say, I treat these people that have litigation the same as I treat the people that I'm just trying to help. I do what's best for them. And people said I've dealt with a hired gun. No, it's true. Sometimes they can be horrible. Sometimes they can be really good too. And sometimes they can be really fair. So they're not all bad, and all treating physicians aren't good. But generally speaking, I usually put more weight on a treating physician as well. Where
we're dividing is whether or not that turned into post-concussion symptoms. And again, it's just they may not be aware of, you know, the litany of research that confirms that post-concussion symptoms are real and persistent post-concussion symptoms are real, despite normal findings on neuropsychological assessment. A lot of their attacks seem to want to place a lot of the blame and the burden on prior diagnoses, like his prior anxiety or his prior depression or his prior headaches or his prior findings. But the important thing to note is that this is a man who at that age of his late 60s was very, very active, was very high functioning, you know, was someone that was volunteering on the community all the time. He organized social gatherings for people. I mean, this is someone that was engaged to be married, you know, and now has lost even that prospect. I mean, this has completely changed his life physically, emotionally, biologically, psychologically, and socially. We call it a biopsychosocial model, right? And he has been affected in all those domains. And like I said, a litany of literature will back this up.
So she gives why she disagrees with them. But Gloria makes a great point. Hello, Gloria. She relied on self-report, and that's not necessarily true. We're going to get into self-reporting today. We're going to get into subjective complaints of patients / clients, injured parties in these cases, and why it's so important and why it's not as abnormal or just something that happens in litigation as some people may think. But that's coming a little bit later. She talks a lot about how she spent 30 plus hours with Terry, more than any of the defense experts. He went through this boot camp, you know, with her concussion therapy or whatever it is that she does, post-concussion therapy. Then we get to cross-examination, and James says, I'm going to do it quick because we don't have a lot of time. I may have said Owens earlier, may have been James that interrupted, but either way. And again, she takes the opportunity during cross-examination to take some more shots at the defense experts. Now, I think some jurors might not like this. I thought it was fine, but some jurors may not like this. So you always have to be careful how hard you go.
Really clear that you did not look at prior medical records.
Well, but I did not go off nothing for that. I asked him about his history.
Dr. Fung, I did not say that you went off nothing. I very specifically asked whether you went through medical records to look for prior history that might have some influence on Mr. Sanderson's findings in your clinic. And the answer is that you did not do that, correct?
I did not do that for Terry, but I don't do that for most patients that come to me. And so I need to just further correct you that most times when you go to the doctor, you know, you don't come with a whole stack of medical records. You come to the doctor saying, hey, these are my symptoms. This is what's going on. This is what happened. Can you treat me? And so
let's pause there for a second before she goes after the defense experts. And Runkle and I think he's doing a stream tonight as well. If you want to check that out, I'm not sure if it's the same time as as this one, but if it's the same time, check it out. If you're here now, check it out after. If it's later, check out his stream. So he posted that he can't get, I can't remember what it is. I don't want to misquote him. He can't get something without bringing all of his records, and he's seen a neuropsych and he had to bring all of his records. And so I am not using, well, I guess I can use my own personal experience as well, but my own personal experience and working with thousands of people that have been injured and go to the doctor, it is very abnormal for you to bring all of your prior records. Sometimes you will bring specific relevant prior records, like for a neck injury. If you have had a neck surgery before, you'll bring those records. If you've treated with a chiropractor and then you're going to a neurospine surgeon, you'll bring those chiropractic records or your MRIs of your cervical spine or something like that. But for the most part, every time you go to a doctor, you don't bring all your records, especially to the level. This is what happens in injury cases. Okay, let's pull back the curtain a little bit. The defense will pull every single PCP, primary care physician record that you have in your entire life. So if you sneezed and then your nose started bleeding, and now you're saying, I have some kind of brain injury and I'm bleeding out. Well, you've bled from your nose in the past, right? That's what they'll say. I had a concussion, I'm foggy. Well, you've had migraines in the past, haven't you? You played football in high school, didn't you? They will bring out everything to try to sprinkle some doubt. And we heard that throughout today. And it is working on some jurors. And it is absolutely not working on others. It depends on the type of jury and juror that you are. Some people on Twitter, which it can be a great space to crowdsource and get information and what people think, just like this. I love hearing what you all think about this. And at Tragos Law on Twitter and Instagram, if you want to get on there and follow me and get into this discussion as well. When he said something like, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, isn't it true the plaintiff has gotten COVID twice and he had a bad bout with it? And COVID can cause fogginess or whatever. And I had people commenting that is true. COVID can do this, a very common sign of COVID. So, I think a lot of his, maybe lethargy and feeling old and not being able to do as much and brain fog and all that stuff, I think probably came from the COVID. It's like, I don't remember any experts testifying of that. Do you? I remember lots of experts saying he got a concussion, which that's also the results of a concussion and post-concussion syndrome. But they say the word COVID and people start thinking of all the side effects of COVID. And now they're going to start pushing some of his damages toward COVID instead of the concussion. And that's what happens. And that's sometimes what defense attorneys do. And to me, that just tells you I have had clients that are literal teenagers, and they get a single level herniation in their lower back after a car accident where their car was totaled. And the defense attorney's expert will say, well, we don't know that could have happened before. There's degeneration on this 17-year-old spine. And, everybody's spine is a little degenerative. I'm like, okay. So everybody's spine is injured regardless of whether they get in a car accident, but it certainly could not have come from this car accident. She went to the doctor the day before and said that she had no back pain. Yet she could have. That's what they'll say. They will find everything. I see people saying, now listen, I think it's a cash grab. Terry's a grifter. Say whatever you want about him. Okay, I don't know. And I'm not saying just for this case specifically, okay? I'm not saying for this case specifically. And Shelly, I agree with you. Shoot. COVID is too new to have. I misread this. So I agree, but I think there are some studies and there are some side effects that people do agree with, but nobody has said what Terry is dealing with is from COVID. That's just the defense attorney throwing some stuff against the wall. And degenerative does not mean injured. You're absolutely correct. But that's what the defense attorneys will say, and that's what the defense doctors will sometimes say. They will always find something, is my point. They will pick things out of records. And when you're 69 years old, they're going to be able to find stuff. He's been wearing hearing aids for 40 years. Okay. What does that prove? And people are like, well, he just seemed really sickly. They're reading all this stuff. He was going blind in one eye. He had NPH. It's like, okay. Does that mean people that wear hearing aids can't be injured in an accident? Does that mean people that get COVID can't get a concussion? Because I agree. Listen, I agree, Candy. I think priors are very important. I don't know that it's a cash grab yet. I'm reserving ruling on that. But the fact that, okay, listen, Courtney, relax. Everybody, people that are like, that's not what he said. I know that's not what he said. Go check my Twitter timeline. That's what a bunch of people are taking from his individual question on COVID. He just said plaintiffs had COVID twice, right? And he had a rough bout with it, right? That's all he said. But other people are getting that because that is clearly what they're trying to imply. You can disagree with me if you want. I've had lots of these cases, and if there's one thing I know it's what they want people to infer when they talk about comorbidities and prior injuries. I had a client that I talked about had a slew of comorbidities and prior issues that had nothing to do with this accident. It was a neck injury, but they talked about everything. IBS, urinary tract infections, migraines, his broken pinky finger, stuff that had nothing to do with his neck, just to make it seem like he is sickly, as if that has anything to do with this. So I will tell you where I think the plaintiffs are missing, though. I will tell you where I think the plaintiffs are missing, okay? And we're kind of going all over the place, but there's a lot going on. It was about depression. Okay, so again, him asking a question about COVID is supposed to prove that that's where the depression is coming from? That's not how this is supposed to be done, just so you know. There's supposed to be expert medical testimony that says his depression came from COVID, not from this. How would you know someone's depression came after COVID? They would report it to you. That's how you would know. And he's reporting that it's from this incident. So now you're just saying he's a liar. I'm going to pick what his depression's about, not him. That's not how anybody diagnoses depression or anything else. So that's not how we're going to do it here. And I don't mean to hate on Courtney. I'm glad Courtney's in here. I'm glad she's giving these comments and these opinions, because that creates the content. That creates the conversation. So I hope Courtney understands that. And I hope you stick, and I hope you keep giving me these comments, holding me accountable, making sure I'm listening, and making sure I'm agreeing with your points and not misquoting you. Just so you know, want to make sure. So Dina, he had depression prior to the accident. Totally fair point, right? And I don't want to confuse points. And I'm not necessarily specifically talking about Terry Sanderson. I'm talking generally how this stuff is supposed to be proven to a jury and how defense lawyers do it many times. Okay, let's listen to her hit on the defense attorneys a little bit more.
I just want to be very clear. I am not a forensic. I don't do this forensically. A lot of the defense experts, that's when they'll need all these medical records to make all these opinions. I'm a treating doctor. I come with the patient as they are and provided medical records sometimes.
Right, but you did know when you treated Mr. Sanderson that he was in active litigation about exactly the sorts of things you were evaluating him for, and that your testimony, your opinions would be used in this case, did you not?
No, I did not, because there are some people that come in with attorneys that never, ever, ever ask me for an opinion at all. We have some people that come in without an attorney that through the course of the time get one, and then I have to testify. But I think unlike some of your defense experts, I'm a treating physician 95% of the time. I only do this when I have to in these cases.
Right. But
that holds water to me, but I am a plaintiff's lawyer. Okay. I am a plaintiff's lawyer, but that holds water to me. All right. And then they start talking about some of the pre-existing conditions. And again, that can be good evidence. That can be bad evidence, depending on what your strategy is. And I think, personally, I think it would have been better if the plaintiffs would just would have accepted that he had some of these pre-existing conditions that a lot of you see. And this is one of the ways that I think they missed. I think, and when I say being honest about the case, I don't mean that they're lying. I don't mean that they're being disingenuous. I don't mean that they are trying to trick anybody. I think they're doing what they think is best for the client. But I think the true facts of this case are that Terry Sanderson has pre-existing issues. Maybe some anger issues, maybe some depression, maybe some brain issues, with maybe prior strokes, COVID, whatever, the NPH, whatever you want to say. Some of that existed before this incident, okay? That's number one. I believe this ski crash happened. Now, who hit who? I don't know yet. Let's take a second now, John. Put Kenneth White. I'm going to star your comment here. John, put the poll up. So we're going to put a poll up. I want to know if at this point, what you think the plaintiff has proven his injuries as a result of the crash are. If you think that he is at fault for the crash, I don't care. We're not asking that question, right? Who's at fault for the crash is a different question. The poll I want to put up is, what do you think his injuries are as a result of this crash? Now, I put broken ribs and concussion together because most of the doctors are grouping those together. I think I put like long-term or severe or permanent brain injury. I put all of the above, and I put none of the above. Okay? So that's the one I want you to answer that question and let me know what you think they've proven. And as you answer that, I am going to give you where I think I'm at and what I think the plaintiff should have done. I think, based on the medical records, based on all the testimony and evidence in this case, that he had those pre-existing injuries and conditions, none of which were broken ribs. Broken ribs are incredibly illustrative of a traumatic event. There's many things you can get over time. Fractured ribs are very uncommon to happen over time. So that makes me believe, and everybody agrees, there was some kind of ski collision. So I think the collision absolutely caused the broken ribs, and I'll give him a concussion as well. That's what I think the injuries are, if I'm being honest with my client about this case. And I hear a lot of this testimony that he is blaming everything on this case. And that is understandable. You have to realize what people are like when this happens to them. And it feels it's so frustrating how unfair it is. All I'm doing is skiing. Let's just assume he's telling the truth. All I'm doing is skiing. And somebody plows into me from behind. And now I've got broken ribs. I've got a concussion. And my life feels so much harder. So I'm going to blame it all on that. I think by asking for, as Kenneth said, $3.1 million, you have to prove a serious brain injury. I don't know if I want to give this up. I was going to tell you where I think the value of this case is right now, but I think I'll hold that. We'll do that later on when they start talking about actual damage numbers. But I think if they come in and they say 4 broken ribs and a concussion, and they put a value on that, and that is what they are proving, not that he is basically never going to cognitively function again because of this incident, that's what I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around. And we're going to hear a lot of these experts say, well, yes, that's what the records say. That's what the treaters say. That's what the diagnosis was in the medical records, which I think they're repeating so much, but it's not having that effect in really proving to me that this is the reason all of those other problems are having. So the broken ribs, however long they took to heal, easily connected to this accident. The brain injury is a concussion, a mild traumatic brain injury, but not a moderate or severe brain injury. I would not come anywhere near, and I know they haven't said that. John, send me the poll results whenever you have them. And I think that it's a bit of over trying the case. I would have eaten the priors, eggshell plaintiff, here's his injuries. Let's talk about the value of those injuries. And I think it would have been much more digestible for the jury. I could be wrong, but that's kind of where I'm at. All right. Wow. Okay. I'm pretty surprised at these results. So we have over 1,000 results. So go, as you're voting, hit that like button. Judge brought it down to 300,000. I do not think that is the case. I could be wrong, but I do not think they asked for 3.2 million in opening. I have not seen that the judge brought it down to 300. I think that would be insane if the judge could just limit it to 300 without something that the plaintiffs already did or agreed to. So 68% of the votes so far go to concussion and broken ribs. 68%, that's pretty big. But 22% say all of the above with a permanent brain injury and a concussion and broken ribs. So that's 90% of you think that he did suffer a permanent brain injury, concussion, and broken ribs. Now, that could mean that you think a concussion is a permanent brain injury, which I would agree with you. It's brought down to 300K. Where's everybody getting that? There's a poll on Brooklyn Basement. There's a poll on YouTube to vote. I've got to go look that up again. I have not seen that 300K anywhere. Oh, lawyer costs limited to 300K. Whatever. I don't want to get too confused, but I'm positive they asked for 3.2 million in opening. So only 1% of you, only 8% of you. Oh, because there was also 1% that just said the permanent brain injury. And then 8% of you said none of the above. So only 8% of you think that he was not injured, which to me, the poll is closed now. John, repost it if you can. I don't know what happened there. But I really think that they have proven he broke his ribs and had a concussion here. They don't need to belabor it. They don't need to bore the jury. All right, let's get back to Dr. Fong. We've kind of gone all over the place here. She did say things like, I'm the best judge because I spent the most time with him. Some people were turned off by that. She did get defensive and argumentative a little bit with James. I thought it was a good sparring back and forth between them. She's not board certified, which, she says doesn't matter, but most jurors like to hear that you're board certified. She said it didn't matter. And she did find out that Sanderson fell and hit his head and was out cold for 45 minutes. She did say that she would recommend treatment, and that would be a big deal. And that to me is another reason why it would be really hard for me as a juror to differentiate what the permanency is of his brain injury because of a severe fall where he was out cold for 45 minutes. I'd like to hear more about that, frankly. All right. Then we get to Polly Sanderson, whom on direct I loved. I thought she was amazing. And a lot of people had mixed opinions on her. She lived in Idaho. She volunteers. She teaches. She does all this stuff, very admirable jobs. Her husband is a firefighter, or as my firefighter friends like to remind me, America's heroes. So all of these witnesses for Sanderson, to me, the lay witnesses, have been so incredibly likable, including Terry Sanderson himself, an optometrist, military, just seems like a great guy, great family. Now, we hear a little bit about his angry side as we get further into this testimony, but again, I think good background, good witness. Talked about how they did things together, how he was so great, et cetera, exactly what you'd expect. Some negatives are that he's selfish, he doesn't think about others. He was really smart. Her parents divorced when she was in high school. They liked his new girlfriend, who I believe was the person that we heard testify. How he changed after the crash. His processing speed was slower. He gets lost in the forest through the trees. He had a short fuse. He didn't used to. She wouldn't recommend him going overseas alone. And he did lose friendships because of the injuries. Okay. All good testimony for the plaintiffs. Then they got into this conversation, which maybe they were trying to do it before the defense did, but where he was getting in the face of her sister and screaming F you at her. Oh, I think that was post-accident. That's why. And she said, my sister did not deserve that. Then on cross, Owens mentioned how his nephew took her deposition, which I thought was interesting. I just think it's a fun fact, family lawyers. And he says, I know this isn't fun for you. Asked if she watched the trial. And I thought it was a kind of a nice start. And I was like, maybe his demeanor is going to be better. Goldstein said, your dad is obsessed with this case. Do you agree? Yes. It'll be better for everyone when it's done. Yes. She doesn't know what happened on the slopes. No. Great cross so far. He gets her to say that if she could go back and tell her dad not to bring this lawsuit, she would, because she knew it would be, if she knew it was going to be this hard, I would have followed up. He kind of just continued on. But then we start to get into the fact that Jenny, the youngest sister, didn't talk to her dad for 13 years after she moved out. Paulie's like, no. And he asked that question or reiterated it what seemed like 100 times. And Paulie always said, no, I don't think you're correct on that. More on that later. Then he says, Jenny committed to coming to this trial in writing and then pulled out. And we're going to listen to that exchange because he's very clearly trying to put in front of this jury that somebody, maybe even Terry Sanderson, threatened or did something to keep Jenny from testifying. I am shocked the judge allowed him to imply this unless he maybe has something from Terry Sanderson, because we haven't heard Terry Sanderson's cross yet. Maybe he has something that's going to show that's exactly what happened here.
Your impression, did you believe that's a positive thing?
I have no opinion on that.
Jenny has a pretty strong opinion on that, doesn't she?
She does.
That it was in an awful, unhealthy way. Is that her opinion?
Are those words she used in her deposition?
Just ask.
Oh, go ahead.
I've been told not to read the deposition, so I'm just asking you to comment. Jenny believes it was an awful, unhealthy way. Do you agree?
No.
You think Jenny would say, by the way, let me ask you about Jenny for a minute.
Yeah.
Have you talked to Jenny about this trial?
She knew I was coming. Mm-hmm.
Jenny committed in writing to attend this trial, and then let me finish my question, and then pulled out.
That's relevant. The jury should disregard the question.
Do you know if Jenny's planning?
So he sustained the objection there, but then he let him ask more questions, and maybe it was because the plaintiff's attorneys didn't object enough. But that stuff should be stricken. That's totally inappropriate.
To attend this trial?
To answer that. Oh, she's not planning on attending.
Do you know that there was a point in time when she committed to attend this trial?
Overruled.
Are you
I was
Okay,
not
now
aware.
he lets her get into it. He
or
lets
that
him
she
get
was
into it.
planning to attend the trial?
Asked and answered, so there's not relevance to any more questions along this line.
Did you or anyone you know attempt to dissuade her from attending this trial?
No, she felt like it would be a financial hardship. I said I would be happy to pay for her plane ticket if she wanted to come.
I did too. Do you know that?
That's totally irrelevant.
I think the witness opened it up, so.
I offered to pay.
I agree. And this was a great line for Owens. Like, she's like, financial hardship, I agreed to pay, or I said I'd pay for it. Owens like, I agreed to pay for her to come out here. That's how good she is for us. That's what he wants this jury to know. And they're still going to read her deposition, but Owens wants the jury to know this guy's daughter is such a good witness for us. Gwyneth Paltrow was willing to pay for her to come testify. Yet somehow, after in writing committing to come testify, she bailed. Now, they could have subpoenaed her, but they didn't, which is interesting. Then they get into how Terry was abusive to Jenny, controlling. And then we get into how Polly disagrees with the way Jenny perceives certain things. Many people on Twitter were very offended by this. I think that we found out later in the day that Jenny has a mental health diagnosis, which we're not going to mention here because they decided to do it in camera, not in the public view. So I don't want to mention anything. And they said there may not be a basis for it. I'm not going to get into that, but she may have a certain diagnosis that does make certain things that she says either not true or that she perceives them in an incorrect way or not a true way, however you want to kind of describe that. And I think some people were very put off and said Polly was dismissive of her. I kind of listened to it as Polly was trying to answer the questions without saying something, because we heard later, if that diagnosis gets brought up, it's going to be a mistrial. That's what Owen says. So I think Polly was trying to maybe say it without saying it and explain how sometimes she disagrees with Jenny. I feel like she said things like, that's her truth. I respect her experience. That's not how I perceived it, but that's how she perceived it. Other people took it as dismissive. So it really just depends on the 8 jurors that are sitting there and trying to determine the credibility of Polly versus the credibility of Jenny. And that's really what it's going to come down to. Then we take the break and we come back from break. And one of the best part, and he gets into it with her on Jenny. And I'll tell you what he thought about it and what he thought about the exchange, because this is how he starts his cross after lunch.
Let the record reflect the jury's back in the room and parties and counsel are present. Mr. Owens?
I need to apologize. I was being an ass earlier. You are. It was wrong for me to triangulate you, your dad, and your sister, and your mom. And I ask for your forgiveness. You love.
So he apologizes for being an ass, pitting her mom, her dad, her sister all against each other. And then literally is about to go in on it again. But that is pretty funny. Let's see here. Made me think, did he check Twitter? I'm going to have to look up this 300,000 thing because so many people are putting it in the chat and it's frustrating me, but I will get to it later. All right. Somebody just said Polly was great until she wasn't. I think she lost the case for her dad. I don't think anybody is going to win or lose this case for Gwyneth Paltrow or Terry Sanderson. I think it is 100% on their testimonies. I think the jury is going to have enough for. So Legal Vices here originally claimed $3.1 million for the hit and run April 2022. Claim of negligent infliction of emotional distress and punitive damages were dismissed. Now $300K for simple negligence resulting in injury. So I will just say, I have never heard of a judge limiting damages. Never tried a case in Utah, so that could be the reason why. But a judge limiting damages to $300K in a simple negligence case, because negligence, I mean, you can have future medical bills and things like that, but more importantly, the reason I'm basing it off this is, I just realized John was gone for a minute, so I want to make sure I didn't miss any, which I did. Is the real reason I'm basing mine on the 3 million or 3.1 million or 3.2 million or whatever is because that's what the plaintiff's lawyers asked for literally in opening statements to the jury. So if it really is limited to 300,000, that's going to make the plaintiff's opening look very, very weird. But I'm going to look it up later. And hopefully I have a better answer for you later. All right. Back to cross of the sister. He texted you this link. Did you open it? Did you access it? There was a lot of discussion about this GoPro link again and whether or not she ever saw the GoPro link, whether or not she knew what it was, and she said she didn't. She said she thought she couldn't access it. They argued about it a little bit. Did you ever say that in your depo? I asked you 100 questions on this, and you could have fixed your depo. The reason we take depos is so years later, people don't come up with new memories. Literally, this is the man that apologized for being a jerk just minutes earlier. He just can't help himself. He really can't help himself. He's a tough one for me. He's a real tough one for me. To sit here and, try to compliment and be as nice as I can as I sit here and play Monday morning quarterback, because I'm not trying this case. So I always try to be super respectful and complimentary of the lawyers as much as I can. Sister was in her crash, hurt her knee. Dad was also in a ski crash, hurt his knee. So he's setting up how knee injuries are normal. Gwyneth Paltrow hurt her knee too. Concussions and rib fractures are abnormal. Okay. Again, he talks about how the dad said he was okay after the crash. And then he says, and this I would have objected to, the plaintiff's lawyer didn't. So we don't know where the link is. The most important piece of evidence in this case. I saw a lot of you send me this link and what it was. And if you look up something similar to it, that it's a photo and not a GoPro. Now, the statement was, I can't believe this was all caught on GoPro. That somebody else wrote, I think. But the link maybe is not the most important piece of evidence, which you all sent me. I don't know that to be true. I haven't seen that come out in the trial. But why would that be the most important piece of evidence? We don't know what's on it. Right? Now, I think that's the point, is a lot of you have already picked up on this, and I see the comments coming in. And that's exactly what he wants everybody to think, is that it shows that Terry ran into Gwyneth Paltrow. That's what the GoPro video must show. Interesting. We don't know that that's what it shows, but that's what we call an inference. A negative inference that you can take from something not being produced by the party that has control over it, which would be the plaintiff in this case, seemingly. Then she also says there's inherent risks in skiing, including hurting your knees, which her dad did in the past. So I would write down every witness that talks about inherent skiing, of getting crashed into. I've been crashed into. I've been hurt. I've hurt my knee. Every single witness gets up and says that. And I would make sure to read every witness's name that said that in closing, if I'm the defense in this case. Then again, he proceeds to go through every physical ailment he could find in the records, including hamstring pulls, arthritis. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't talk about a broken fingernail that Terry Sanderson had at some point in his past. Now, some of you hold on to that and say, I saw a comment just fly through, he's a hypochondriac. This guy's always complaining about everything. Okay, that's exactly the strategy they're going for. I don't know what most of those have to do with the injuries he's claiming in this case, especially 4 broken ribs. The 4 broken ribs is really big to me because that's totally indicative of a traumatic event. Then we heard about how Terry would read a book while driving. That seems wild to me. And that shows bad judgment and unsafe action. There was an objection that was sustained because, again, that could be seen as propensity evidence. Like, what does that prove? How is that relevant? It's not. That's why the objection was sustained. Again, improper, but you can't unring the bell. I will tell you right now, I think that Owens has done multiple things that are going to be appealable issues if he wins this case. Now, he probably would still take the win either way, but just mentioning these little things to the jury is inappropriate, because then the jury's going to make the leap that if he's willing to read a book when he drives, he's probably willing to not pay attention when he skis, which one thing does not prove the other. And I know there are going to be people that disagree with me in the chat, but legally speaking, not an appropriate argument. His travels didn't suffer. He's traveled all around the world. He traveled all around the United States. And I think that's fine. And I think that goes to, listen, maybe closer to $300,000 in damages, which maybe is even more than I was going to say. I was going to say somewhere around 250, but versus 3.1 million. And that's where we go with, what are you actually asking for? What are you actually asking for? Because I think that's really important when we go to this jury. Also, the defense, I remember saying they're asking for millions of dollars. The defense has said that in their opening as well. On redirect, she's asked, why do you think your dad was obsessed with this case? He's principled and he couldn't believe someone would hit him and not care to help him. He thinks someone should be held accountable for their actions in this case. Then they get in a little bit to Jenny. It was kind of clunky. Again, she struggled to communicate. This was the stuff people had a big problem with, which I understand. I don't think Jenny should be on trial here. I think Jenny's words should speak for themselves. I think they can listen. As a lawyer, you have to attack the credibility of a witness that you think is not credible. That's what they did on Jenny, so I can understand where they're coming from. But I understand people having a problem with it as well. And then, again, a guy who has apologized for pitting family members against each other already. Let's hear him pit family members against each other once again, because if Jenny happens to be watching this, I don't think she's going to take too kindly to this.
Did you read her 136-page deposition?
Am I allowed to?
Of course you are.
No, I have not read her deposition.
Well, I don't know if you are, but I didn't give it to you. I'm just wondering. Does it surprise you that?
Of course you are. I mean, this guy just says stuff without thinking. That would scare me if he was my lawyer. Of course you are. Well, actually, I don't know. I didn't give it to you. That's all. It's like, what? So can she or can't she? It's very weird.
Question and answering were perfectly eloquent. The whole thing for like hours and hours.
She had no foundation to answer that question, and that's just a personal thing. Sustained.
Does it surprise you that Jenny could talk eloquently for hours and hours?
Sustained. It sounds like counsel's testifying.
Okay. She has a bachelor's degree, right?
Well, it's hard fought, but we got there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the answer?
Yes, is the answer.
And people got angry about that. It was hard fought, but we got there. This is hard, okay? Yeah, I think that was probably a little bit too much. But if you're in a situation where if you've had people in your life that do struggle with mental health issues, and you feel strongly about a family member as close as your father, and you feel like those mental health issues are creating an issue unfairly against your father, and that she's saying stuff that you don't think is true, it would be a really hard line to walk and a really hard thing to balance. That was something I probably wouldn't have said, but I do understand the struggle that she's going through right here. I'm going to give her grace, like I try to do with everybody, and I would hope people would do to me.
It sounds like I'm defending your sister here, and you're not. So let's kind of talk about it.
No, because I will. Yeah.
Overruled.
I can't believe the judge overruled that. That's not even a question. That's just counsel testifying. But again, that's what he said. Jury heard it, and that's what came in. Again, I think that's him being a jerk. And he apologized for it, which makes me not really believe his apology now, right? Because he just went right back to doing it. And then once again, maybe speaking a little too quickly or before he's thinking, we get this little gem that he stops the trial to read into the record after tons of questions about Jenny not talking to her dad for 13 years. And I believe it was even said in opening statements.
Robin Dale, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And she went to,
Overruled. Go ahead. And
she went to you took Jenny to Europe with him, didn't he?
That's correct.
They have a good time?
No, it was miserable. I think at some point she sent me footage where the bearing had gone out on my dad's wheelie suitcase. And it was just an hour and a half of him spinning the wheel trying to figure it out. And when I said, how are things going? No.
Your Honor, I'm going to put this on the record because I think I misspoke. With Jenny, you said that
You think you misspoke, sir? You know you misspoke. Many times you misspoke.
when your father didn't. Your Honor, I'm going to put this on the record because I think I misspoke. with Jenny, you said that you and your father didn't speak for 13 years after you graduated from high school. We spoke.
I object to this.
I'm correcting my error. I spoke in error. It says we spoke. It was just distant. So I misspoke. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So
I don't know why the plaintiff's attorneys objected. I would have just let him do it. And I would have literally, in closing argument, been like, hey, remember when he testified that he was totally wrong about one of the points he continued to bring up? That's what I would have done. I mean, that's why I've never seen that. Just FYI, I've never seen that. All right. And then we get another doctor that was in the Navy, great resume, aerospace engineer, PhD in biomedical mechanical engineering. He took general surgery and neurology and neuroradiology. I mean, this guy was like the expert of all experts. And he says that he insists on seeing someone in person. And we're going to talk more about that, I know, when we get to your questions, because you guys are going to have questions about it. But he also insists on seeing someone in person. And if you remember back to Johnny Depp's case, this was also a huge point for all of these doctors when we're dealing with depression and anxiety and any mental health issues that can come from post-concussion syndrome or domestic violence or whatever it may come from. It's so important to meet with the patient. And most of you agreed with that as well. He also talked about how witnesses can be exceedingly helpful. BNA witnesses. What was he like before? What was he like after? The client's own testimony. And a lot of you say, and a lot of you are correct, well, they could be lying. And you're right. They could be lying. More on that in a second. He doesn't have dementia. He doesn't have Alzheimer's. He confirms all the reports. Again, concussion, broken ribs. Brain injury was mild. Again, I like this expert. He would have been my chief expert, and I would have built my case around exactly what he said. Broken ribs, concussion, stuff lingered. But the brain injury was mild, and it's still ongoing and permanent. But it was mild. It didn't cause him to not be able to travel. It didn't cause him to not be able to think. He is not going to never enjoy another day in his life. That is not the case. He's enjoyed many days. There are just some days where it's a lot more difficult. And I think you can get behind that as a jury. Now, once again, very important evidence. And I think he explained it even better than the first expert that explained it. And I think his expertise is more along the lines of describing how bodies move and how injuries occur based on bodies moving. And I will tell you, up until this point, I really had no clue which way I was going, who hit who, whether it was Sanderson or whether it was Paltrow. After this, the scales are tipped just a little bit. Again, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, just greater weight of the evidence. And at this point, he tipped the scales for me to think that Gwyneth Paltrow did in fact run in to Terry Sanderson. That's just where I'm at. I'm going to play this for you and tell me, you guys let me know if you get swayed at all by his description of why he believes, medically speaking, that that's the way it went and that's the way it happened.
The closed head trauma from the ski accident.
What are your opinions as to the cause of the TBI?
Well, basically his head struck the ground, and that would be the fourth application that would result in the closed head injury, resulting in the TBI. What are your conclusions or opinions regarding the rib fractures? Well, that once again, that came from his contact with the ground, from the ski accident, that is.
Okay. Well, based upon your biomedical engineering and the physics, tell us what this can indicate regarding the cause of his fall to the ground.
Well, the falling to the ground resulted from his center of gravity being shifted outside of the torso, so he had it drew him to the ground. And so the question becomes, what caused that shift in his center of gravity, causing him to fall to the ground? And that was, since he fell to the right side, and that was
I'm going to come back to
externally applied force application.
Sorry, Lita, I'm going to come back to that one. Sorry. And I just interrupted him explaining it, so I'm going to back it up a little bit. But I pulled the comment down. I'm going to come back to that later.
What caused that shift in his center of gravity, causing him to fall to the ground? And that was, since he fell to the right side, and that was the impact from, or an externally applied force application from his left side. And that's what caused it.
So he specifically says it was caused by Gwyneth Paltrow running into him And now he continues to explain she would have been the cushion underneath him if he ran into her. And I think this was a good enough explanation to where I'm saying, again, it's the broken ribs are the most important thing to me. But on cross, I'd get up and say, so you're saying it's impossible that he couldn't have hit her and then maybe tumbled and broken his ribs, or broken his ribs when he hit her, or on the way down, or they hit a ski or something like that? I would ask those hypotheticals on cross.
Okay. Now, does this indicate that Terry Sanderson was hit from behind?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, if you got a witness saying that he was struck from behind, but suffice it to say, the force application came from behind and from the left side, causing him to go over onto his right side. And that's where that impact did not result, that first impact did not result in rib fractures or concussion. It was his contact with the ground that resulted in the injuries that we see in the medical records.
Okay. Can you explain how your understanding of force application show this?
Well, the biggest thing is that when you fall to the ground and you have evidence of rib fractures on the lateral side of your torso, then obviously there was a force application directly to the ribs in that location. And so when you fall to your right side, your elbow or your arm gets in the way between your chest wall and the ground. And so the hard object would be you, i.e. your arm and elbow, making contact with the ribs, resulting in the rib fracture. And then very, very shortly after that, then you strike your head against the ground as well.
Does this explain or show that Terry Sanderson was hit from behind by Gwyneth Paltrow?
Well, I don't know who, I guess it was her that struck him, but yes, it does show that he was struck from behind and went forward to the right, causing those injuries upon impact of the ground.
So again, he makes a good point. He's like, I don't know who struck him. I mean, I guess it was her based on what's happening, but he was struck from behind. Which again, his explanation I thought was the best explanation of it. And then he also gives an explanation, which we had, I believe, a doctor in the chat that disagreed with this. But again, when we have trials, this is the expert evidence that we have to go on. And this is where I believe the 18 months equals permanent line came in opening.
Well, that has always been the issue here, whether or not the concussion is permanent or temporary. The fact that his symptoms have lasted from a neurological sense greater than 18 months, we regard that as being permanent. And you can see that as of 6 years after the event when I saw him, he still had these symptoms. So his symptoms have been indicative of a permanent condition.
A permanent brain injury?
Yes, I mean, he has a mild TBI or a permanent concussive disorder.
Okay. You mentioned some things involved with executive function and other.
So again, from an expert, there you have it. That's what he says. Whether you agree with it or not, up to you as a juror. You can take the credibility. What experts do you believe? What do you not? Who do you not believe? He also talks about a pre-existing condition of NPH. So we put the vote up again, and the votes, 2,000 votes, and again, almost exactly the same. 10% of you say none of the above. 90% of you say concussion, broken ribs, permanent brain injury, all of the above, some combination of that. The vast majority, 67% concussion and broken ribs. He talks about how he does have the pre-existing findings of NPH. I like this explanation as well. He has the pre-existing findings on an MRI of NPH, but not the subjective findings and subjective complaints, which is very important. And that's going to bring me to what we call a clinical correlation. NHP or NPH, what is it? NPH, I think, is a brain. I keep forgetting what it is. I keep forgetting what it is, but it's basically a brain disorder. So that he had prior to the crash. So a clinical correlation. They talked about this today, and I wanted to get to it when we talk about these subjective complaints that everybody or a lot of people seem to think is total hogwash and probably a lie, and everybody lies to get money. And these claims are usually frivolous, and a lot of people say things like that. Yeah, normal pressure hydrocephalus. Thank you. Every single doctor from the beginning of time does a clinical correlation to try to determine how you got injured. You don't always need to do that to treat the problem, right? If you come in with a broken arm, they can usually treat that broken arm not having to know how you broke your arm. Now, sometimes it can be helpful, but Many times doctors do a clinical correlation to try to figure out how you got whatever it is that's wrong with you. The way that they do that is they take your subjective complaints, which mean what you say happened, what you say hurts, when you say it started hurting, and they combine that with objective findings, which can be an MRI, a fMRI, a CT scan, an X-ray, some other kind of neuropsychological testing that they can say is objective, but some of that can be based off your subjective complaints. They say is objective, I should say. So you mesh those together and see if the subjective complaints line up with that. A lot of times we have back injuries and they have numbness running down. You can tell what level it is based on what finger the numbness has. What part of your shoulder hurts, you can tell by does it hurt when you rotate this way or does it hurt when you rotate this way? And you can tell. And you connect those subjective complaints with the objective findings. And in this case, he's saying he got hit in a ski accident. His ribs hurt and his head hurt. And they have x-rays that show broken ribs. As objective of findings afterwards, that you can say he was disoriented and a medical professional was evaluating him in person saying he was disoriented. He had fog. And then he had depression and anger and those kinds of things that follow a concussion. So they're taking his subjective complaints and applying them to the objective evidence that they have. Now, that's why malingering and embellishing and that type of stuff is so important. Yes, okay, here, Candy E, if the plaintiffs get you to this point, but that you believe he was injured in this accident, they're starting to win the case. But I think a lot of people think, and I guess not based on my poll, maybe I'm going overboard on this, that just because he is subjectively complaining about it isn't enough. When in truth, that is how doctors have always treated patients. And we're going to get to the medical records and other things now. Let's jump into the Q&A. All right, we got 6,000 people in the chat again. Let's get to 5,000 likes. We did it again last night. Hit that like button if you guys haven't already. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm trying to get to 20,000 on Instagram at Tragos Law. And let's subscribe so we can keep talking about this case. I love having all of you in here every night. I'm really passionate about this stuff. And this is the thing that's frustrating to me. I'm kind of hopeful that Terry Sanderson's telling the truth, because if he's not, it's a setback for plaintiffs. If it is just a money grab, it's a setback for plaintiffs, because I hate the frivolous lawsuits. It takes away. It's just like somebody wrongfully claiming they're the victim of a crime or victim of domestic violence. It takes away from real victims. Correct, Wendy. I'm not saying it means that she's negligent. We're taking it side by side. But my point is, if he's lying, it sucks and he deserves nothing. But there are people that have serious injuries that are questioned the same exact way because in a primary care record, they said their back hurt one time and now they can never hurt their back in an accident ever. And so that's the frustrating part. But I appreciate all you guys doing this because I'm learning a lot from how you see this case and how you look. Good vibes. I agree. Tomorrow is going to be a great lineup. And yes, many times when not just me, I'm sure other people look at your comments and then a chuckle follows. John, is it a coincidence that GP's attorney, Edgin, ended yesterday's cross quickly after the brain MRI pick and Owens ended today, noting a mistrial? Could GP's attorneys have found someone lying? Thoughts? I don't know. No, I think that they set up that brain MRI to show it's exactly the same before the accident, because that other neuroradiologist said, here, I'm going to put these arrows to the exact points where I think this shows objectively what his issues are. And they're like, but objectively, he had all that before the crash. That's why I think he abruptly stopped after the MRI. We, the jury, I just want to thank you for what you do. You're my favorite YouTuber, fair and honest, two great qualities. Saw you as a guest with Nick, and I said, there's something about Peter. Keep it up. I appreciate it, we, the jury. I'm not sure everybody agrees with you tonight. That's okay. I like the discussion. Janet, my brother-in-law, who is an internist and a radiologist, often talks about the power of sitting with the patient and observing them. There's so much you can tell about their condition. I agree with you, but your doctor, your brother-in-law, who's an internist and a radiologist, is very smart. I bet you if I handed him a stack of thousands of pages of records and I said, find me some problems this person had before this accident, he'd be able to find some, plenty, and connect them. And that's the point. That's their job. They're not trying to make this person feel better. They're trying to find problems. Ellen, Peter, what makes you think Fong is not a hired gun? Fong, I wouldn't say is a hired gun. She was chosen to treat Terry. Now, I think this other guy, I can't remember his name, the bald doctor that we just saw with the great resume, I think he's just a hired gun expert, which I think is interesting. When the plaintiffs go after hired guns and they have hired guns of their own, sometimes that can get muddy. But I do see a major difference in a treater who is doing this testing and doing this therapy to try to help the patient, or doing a surgery on the patient. I see that as a different type of relationship, and it is, because they have a doctor-patient relationship where if the doctor screws up, they can be sued for malpractice. Guess what? The defense attorney can say, none of this has to do with that, and he can be completely wrong and screw the plaintiff over if the plaintiff ever followed something that a defense doctor said, but there's no patient-doctor relationship, and they can't be sued for malpractice. I should say in Florida. I guess that could be different in other jurisdictions. Jay, what's up? Where's the GoPro video that shows what happened? End of story. I'm on the side of Gwyneth Paltrow. She did not ruin his life, period. Interesting. So she did not see, you're doing things here, Jay. It's not an all or nothing. It's not a guilty or not guilty. It's a civil case. So you're on the side of Gwyneth Paltrow. Does that mean you think she didn't run into him? And if she did run into him, we get to the second part where you say she didn't ruin his life, which is fair. That means you can say $1 of damage or $0 in damage. Miss Escobar, in all due respect, documentation is more valuable, as you may forget. I mean, you do have all these issues. So go Cougs. So Mrs. Escobar, I'm so happy you sent this comment. I'm so happy. I vehemently, or what is it? Somebody said, as my dad used to say, violently. I violently disagree with you. Now, violently disagreeing seems bad. That seems too far. I disagree with you. I had a case very recently, within the last 18 months, a trial, where they went through my client's years and years and years. I think he was like 50 years old, all of his medical records. And when we deposed his primary care physician, he admitted to us that his medical records from his office that he dictated were not reliable. The judge agreed, and both sets of attorneys agreed, because it was so clear that throughout so many medical records, way too many things are auto-checked, auto-filled. Once you check them once, they stay there forever. Whether it's you had back pain that day and it stays there forever, so it looks like you've had back pain for 20 years when really you came in with 1 day with back pain. When you said, I didn't smoke, but they do check that you are a smoker. And throughout all of your medical records, it says you're a smoker. When you said you had surgery on your right shoulder in the past, but it was actually your left shoulder, but throughout all the records, it says right shoulder. So sometimes documentation and record can be completely wrong. So I would not say it's more important. I say it's valuable. I absolutely agree with you, it's valuable. But I think people's testimony is also valuable, which is why that is evidence that's held just as high as the medical documentation. And the jury can still weigh the credibility of that documentation. I appreciate the question. I'm not hammering on you. I appreciate that, because it's a good illustration. And I've seen plenty of times where medical records are just wrong. Not all the time, but plenty of times. Scary amount of times. Lita, I was surprised that she didn't want to see his previous medical records. Every medical specialist asks for them. I've worked in healthcare my entire adult life. So I would say maybe every medical specialist that you've worked with, because every medical specialist absolutely does not ask for all your previous records. Many medical professionals I talk to think certain doctors' records are totally worthless for some of the reasons that I mentioned. Now, they usually want to get relevant prior records, like if you've hurt the same part of your body or have had the same issues and talked to another doctor, but very rarely do they want all prior medical records. Paw Printed Heart. His daughter said Terry is mad and just wants to hold somebody responsible. He doesn't think the ski at your own risk applied to him. Melanie, Uhtred, sometimes injuries can be a catalyst for looming problems in the future, but who's to blame for that? I find this case just sad. I do think it's sad. And it's the plaintiff's job to prove that what he's dealing with was caused there, which is why I would limit it to what was actually caused there, not all of his problems. DC Babos, I was in a head-on collision years ago. I had a head concussion and my neurologist would not let me go to work for a whole year. That year was the only year I did not work since I was 11. I'm 55 now. This is what we call very, very compelling evidence. Which is why I don't have a problem with a lot of you saying I don't think Terry's lying because of this or because he traveled or whatever. That's fair. That's exactly what juries are supposed to do. And that's why Terry's going to make or break his own case. Because I think if you took the stand and you explained that, people are going to be like, yeah, this person was hurt for that year. This concussion affected their life unlike anything else. So let's say DC Babos had migraines as a kid. And they try to say, oh, you had migraines, so that has to do with your concussion. It's like, yeah, I had migraines and worked my whole life, except for 1 year. And you know what year that was? The year after I got in this accident and got this concussion. That's the type of evidence we need and we're looking for. So I understand why you guys are still looking for that. No beef with that. Katie. And I just want to tell you, I'm arguing more from a general sense than I am specifically from Terry Sanderson. Katie, if you had a prior injury and it's documented, you shouldn't ski and you get injured skiing, can you still sue? Feels like that should be a no. So like if you're blind and you go skiing by yourself, yes, I think that's a problem. If you have an ACL problem, so your knee is a little weak, I don't think that's a problem. But like, let's just take it for driving. If you don't have a driver's license or you've had your driver's license pulled and you go drive and you get hurt driving, if somebody ran into you and you were doing nothing wrong, even though you shouldn't have been driving, yes, you can still sue. If you did something wrong based on your impairment, then no, you couldn't sue. Hopefully that answers your questions. Sherry, if the jury decides both are responsible, how are awards split? Does the judge or jury decide in Utah? The jury decides the damages in civil cases. I don't know if they have a comparative fault or a contributory negligence or how it's broken down in Utah. I'll look into that before we get to verdict time. Diamonds and doggies. To me, him being absent from court looks like he can't control his emotions and shows me he may have anger issues. I don't think it's a good look for him to not be in court either. Marjorie, there is generally a bad vibe to this whole trial. I can't quite pinpoint it. Hopefully someone will sprinkle some love in that courtroom. Be kind. Is that the only diagnosis is mental health? Is that his diagnosis that he couldn't mention when the sister was on the stand? The judge reminded them, I think. I think it is the sister's mental health diagnosis. That's what I think can't come in. Ellen says compensatory damages limited to $300K in Utah. Okay, definitely something I got to look into. P-Hop, we need the GoPro video. That would be nice. ND, Polly lost me when Cross showed that all the sisters had boundaries with the father before the crash. She is the only one that had a glowing view of the father. She came off as the favorite, too biased. I think we're going to hear from at least one other sister on the plaintiff side, so we'll see. John, the 300K for 3 million has been a huge confusion. Forbes said 300K. Can you confirm? I'll have to look into it. I didn't know this was an issue. Tina, would this even be a civil case if the incident didn't involve a celebrity? I don't know. I can't answer that. Newbie 2015. 1. Polly denied pressing link on the I'm famous. Number 2, message from Shay. Subject, I'm famous. At what cost? Different message. Shay, I can't believe this is all on the GoPro. She clicked the message. 4, regarding the woman who brought him down. I thought Owen said at some point that Polly wasn't on one of those replies, but I don't know. That whole GoPro stuff, the defense is doing a really good job of beefing it up and showing why it's really important that's gone. Isn't that convenient? Because it probably showed something bad. John O'Reilly, allowing questioning on cross-examination about Jenny's attendance was wrong on multiple bases. At the least, the witness should have been made a defense witness. I've heard they've had issues with subpoenaing her. They absolutely could call her. And if they have no evidence that she was intimidated or forced to not coming, I think it's totally inappropriate as well. Mo, I can't stand the coughing lawyer, but Gwyneth's lawyer makes me so angry. Honestly, in my opinion, that doesn't shine a good light on Paltrow. But I really hope people are not gonna choose whether somebody wins or loses based off whether or not they like their lawyer. I would, no matter how anybody feels about the lawyer, I hope that's not why people make decisions on the jury. Tori, I've been sick and gone for a couple weeks. I noticed. Can you tell me, Peter, where your thoughts are? Who do you believe? So far, I would put the greater weight of the evidence toward the plaintiff. I would not put the damages anywhere near $3 million. I'm going to withhold where I kind of think the damages range would be. Mary Capola. This guy is a hypochondriac. I know a lot of people that think that. You'd be shocked. I've got some clients that have so many medical records and go to the doctor for lots of things. Ribs and concussions, yes, from collision. His hearing and sight issues, probably the cause of the collision. I don't even think they're really saying his hearing and sight issues are cause of the collision. Fiance left this guy seems high maintenance in my opinion. So I mean, listen, and that's where I would be if I was the plaintiff. I'd be like, listen, let's try to convince him that Paltrow actually ran into him, which is what we believe, broken ribs and concussion, period. And I think that's very doable. Be kind, never mind, it's Jenny's diagnosing. Yes. Mandy, why doesn't the judge say something to Owens about his comments, interrupting the judge, basically having a temper tantrum, etc.? I don't know, but it would annoy me if I was a judge. Kim D, GP was skiing with a party of 9, including 2 or 3 ski instructors. Why are they not testifying? Owens is again off-putting and just terrible. I think they're going to testify in the defense's case in chief. I can't remember if he said they had like 7 or 9 witnesses, but they didn't actually witness and see the crash with their eyes. That's going to be the issue. Chris Online, if they were both downhill, how come he had broken ribs and she didn't? I believe she injured him and left the scene. Chris, you're the first person to really come out hard in defense, or I should say, on the side of the plaintiff. Just Joe, Canada only allowed to change grammar on a depot. So I will tell you, I thought he went a little far with what you're allowed to do on an errata sheet. You're not actually allowed to change your answer. I've seen people try to do that. You're not allowed to do that. You can do misspellings. You can say, I said 3 and they wrote down tree. You can do something like that, but you can't say something like, I've never seen this before. I've never looked at it. And then on your errata sheet say, actually, I did look at this and here's what it says. You can't do that because you're not giving them the opportunity to cross-examine you. Now, sometimes you can do a supplemental depo and re-talk about that issue and say, you want to correct something you said in your depo, right? But you're not allowed to go rewrite answers in an errata sheet when you review your deposition for inaccuracies. So I think he was a little disingenuous there. Candy E, I don't care for GP's lawyer, but still a jerk lawyer doesn't make her guilty or liable, but I agree with you there. Patrick Mott, coming in late, was actually just watching your day 1 video trying to catch up. Hope everyone in the Lawyer You Know fam as well do the YouTube things. Thank you, Patrick. Yes. Hit that like button, subscribe, all those things. Elaine, I think we can all agree GP's lawyer is terrible. They should have James do the rest. He's way more professional and respectful. I think they're tag teaming this, which I don't like trying cases by myself. I always like to have at least 2 lawyers. It's really helpful to have multiple people trying the case. Paul Printed Heart, just understood the GoPro picture. It shows GP flat in the snow, face down. So unless Terry is a pancake, there is no way GP fell on top of him to break his ribs. I'm not sure I followed that. New Chris, hi, I'm new here. What's this about? What's up, new Chris? Welcome. We are a channel that discusses golf, all things to golf, and I'll fix your golf swing. I'm a golf instructor. Donnie, I disagree with his absolute certainty that the way he could sustain those injuries are if he was hit. I don't think he's ever seen someone fall or crash on skis. He only convinced me of his bias. That guy's pretty educated on how this stuff works. You can disagree with it, that's fine, but I don't know. That's a strong disagreement. But jurors will do that. Susan, honestly, GP and her lawyers are so unlikable. Maybe if she took 10 seconds to ask if he was okay, all of this would be avoided. So the testimony is going to be that I think somebody from Ski Patrol or something said, are you okay? But I agree with you. And that's the point. We talked about this yesterday about how it was an accident. Nobody meant to do it. Makes them less likely to want to hammer Gwyneth Paltrow for this. But she didn't care. She's too important. She couldn't be bothered with asking if he was okay after she ran into him and he was laying on the ground knocked out. That makes you want to hammer her. So that's the way that the plaintiff wants to have the jury view her. Azam, what's up? Thank you so much. Chris, if this was an accident, she would have been apologetic and been a compassionate human, not gotten the heck out of there. Chris, coming in hot. 212K subs, Peter. Yes, Azam, we are growing. Be a part of it. Come hit that subscribe button. It's free. Susan Walls, Johnny Depp's lawyer stated on court TV she needs to lose the blue notebook and wipe the scowl off her face. Yes, Ben Chu. People have sent me this. I maybe will do a video later or this weekend or something breaking down what he said about this case. Evangeline Light, thank you for your time with us. I learn something every time I'm here. So do I. So do I. And I mean that genuinely. And I appreciate everybody that gets in the comments and starts conversations. CMC, is this a scenario where Terry isn't paying for counsel, or how much do you think this has cost him or both sides? So most cases like this would be on a contingency fee. If it's really limited to $300K, I mean, it's not a ton of money for all the, I mean, listen, 6 figures is a lot of money, but for all the work and all the years put into this, I'd be surprised if that's all they could get in this case. I don't know if there's been proposals for settlement or things like that. We don't need to get into the weeds, but usually this would be a contingency fee case, but you can have an hourly agreement. He could be paying hourly. I don't know what the fee agreement is in this case. John O'Rourke. What about Owen releasing Polly from subpoena, then Owen mentioning a mistrial at the end of the day and the judge agreeing? Did you catch that? Yes. That was about Jenny's diagnosis. I was thinking about playing the clip where Owen's like, that was a kind gesture. I was being so kind. Please don't slap me in the face with it. That was something out of kindness. He was just like, wanted to tell everybody how kind he was being for releasing her from her subpoena that she didn't even have, and he never actually subpoenaed her. Deborah B. Peter, we love you, but sometimes I just want to share a chill pill with you. I live needing a chill pill. I live it. I used to joke with my daughter when she was a toddler, like 2 years old, that she was always crazy. And I call her Brooklyn No Chill Tragos, and she gets it from me. Thank you, Margaret. Azam, how does one prove a permanent brain injury? Based on studies and literature that medical professionals do and how long it lasts to where it really never comes back, right? And something that is a permanent loss of a bodily function, permanent scarring. Those are all things that are a permanent injury. Something that will last forever, affect you forever, scar you forever. Different ways to prove permanent injuries. Permanent disfigurement as well. Margaret, plaintiff is blind in one eye. Did that play part in the accident? The defense is trying to say so. And again, I think that's going to be part of it. Maybe he didn't see where he was going, but I think the plaintiff's doing a pretty good job with Ramon. His testimony is going to be very important. And the doctor saying the way and the mechanisms of injury, the fall and the crash had to occur this way. I find that pretty good because you can't always get that. Sometimes they're like, I don't really know how this happened based on these injuries. It could have happened a lot of ways. Hopper, regarding the medical records, I was changing doctors, got copies of my records. A lot of information was wrong, and doctor wrote notes that I asked too many questions and took too much time. Unbelievable. Hopper, I have seen this many times in medical records, many times, and it pisses me off that the doctor couldn't care enough to just do right by this patient. Margaret Healy, thanks for the super sticker. Sawyer, one way to think about this, would a 20-year-old car have worse damage than a 10-year-old car in an accident? Sometimes, not always, because cars can be built with different materials, but usually, yes. Older people or just people with more pre-existing conditions, some younger people have more pre-existing conditions, are more likely to get injured more severely in an accident or a crash like this. Thank you for the super sticker, Jesse Sue. Tori Fowl, does GP have to be in court every day? I don't know what agreements they have, but because the plaintiff's not there, I'd be surprised if the defendant had to be there every day. Medi, no way he walked away to urgent care. I've had broken ribs before. There's nothing more painful than breaking a bone, any bone, and ribs I've heard are the most painful because coughs and laughs. No way he walked away like that. I want to see surgery record of that. Most people don't have surgery on broken ribs. We have seen the x-ray of fractured ribs, and everybody agrees that there are broken ribs. We'll see if the defense lawyers say there were no broken ribs, but so far, everybody has agreed. Keeley, wasn't this on the bunny slope? So I heard it's a green slope, not a bunny slope. What was the speed? I don't know the speed, but seems like enough for some of this to happen. Bev, this guy kind of gives me Amber Heard kind of feeling. Well, let's wait till he takes the stand before we throw that on him. Thank you, Sawyer, for this super sticker. Brooklyn Basement. My friend was hit by a bus 5 years ago in high school. Multiple surgeries. Still hasn't gone to trial. Timeline, typical. So these days after COVID and tort reform and things like that, I have no idea what a typical timeline is anymore. We used to say 6 to 18 months. Now we say 1 to 3 years. But there are cases that last 5 years. This case lasted 7 years. Lucas Lucasi, I ski. People crash all the time. She's a beginner and got in his way. It's your job to maneuver around people in front of you. Hard to look behind you. If you came to that conclusion, that would be a viable discussion you could have with the rest of the jury. Welcome, M. Dean, to the membership crew. Good vibes. It really is $300K now, so Terry will have to share that. yes, he will have to share that unless there's a proposal for settlement, or in Utah, the prevailing party gets attorney's fees. There are different ways around that can happen. The worst part about this is if it is really $300K, the fact that they said $3.2 million is going to turn off some jurors. I don't think this is that big of a deal. And the defense lawyers were able to say, he's asking for millions of dollars for this. If it was only going to be $300K, you use that to your advantage as the plaintiff. She's not a beginner. She skied since she was little. Yeah, I think the ski instructors were there for her kids. Paul Berry, a couple of broken ribs are no big deal for anyone with an active lifestyle. I'm going to disagree with you there. But maybe you're tough, Paul. Be kind. So I remember two things from my son's TBI where he was supposed to die. As his doctor said, we got thousands of miracles, but he said sometimes a pinpoint injury can do severe damage and even kill a person. Emily, non-pecs in USA are wild. 400K cap. God bless in Canada. Sarah Bellum, Peter, if we were in grad school together, I would study with you. We have the same style. Just saying, our type A makes the world go around. Did you hear a lot of that anal retention, or what do you call it? Anal retentiveness or something like that? And they got into some anal talk. It was very uncomfortable. Suzanne, his friend said fell spread eagle yesterday, not what the expert witness said. And the expert witnesses have some differences in how they explained it, which is why I said I thought this guy had the best explanation, but you're right. You can make your decision as a jury based on the evidence, consistencies with the evidence, and inconsistencies with the evidence. Nicole, celebrating my birthday with the Lawyer You Know fam and true love this channel. Thanks, Peter, for all your debates and insight. Nicole, happy birthday. Thanks for hanging out with us here tonight. Truth be told, I want to know what lift they both got off. No decision until we hear both sides. I agree. Let's hear both sides. John O'Reilly, 6 years of litigation with 6 lawyers. A $300K verdict for plaintiff is a loss. Really? 6 different lawyers? Or you're saying 6 lawyers there right now? I don't know. That's interesting, John. AK, Peter, check Insta for DM pick of convo 2 days later. I did see that. And the back and forth and how Mr. Ramon had a very similar explanation of the events. Evangeline Light, thank you for this super sticker. All right. We are getting close to the end here. So I want to say thank you so much for everybody joining us and getting through some of my, soapbox discussions. I'm passionate about this. And I don't know if Terry Sanderson's the right one to do it for, but there are a lot of cases where people are legitimately injured, and the frivolous lawsuits and the fake complaints and the fake injuries and the fake victims make it so much harder for them. And I see what people go through and I see how their lives are affected. And yes, it can be an accident sometimes, but that's why it's important that everybody does their absolute best to take reasonable care and not text and drive and not speed and not mishandle heavy machinery. And doctors doing their job and making sure they do everything they can to protect patients that they are treating. So I appreciate you guys for hanging with me. And all these arguments and all this discussion, I hope you can understand it's all done in love and for educational purposes so we can continue to learn from each other. All right, last couple questions, then I'm out of here. Janet, I was in an auto accident and had several fractured ribs. My hand was broken too and immediately felt that pain. Hours before I felt the rib pain. Shock. I hear you. Sarah Bellum, 1, did he get an MRI after? Yes. Did I miss his medical evidence of a concussion? So the evidence of a concussion is a lot of times based on the testing and the subjective complaints. But the neuroradiologist did say there were certain things on his brain MRI that were indicative of a concussion. However, I think we're going to see a prior brain MRI that has those same abnormalities, so we have to stay tuned. Can we confirm GP left after ski patrol told her? Was he blind in one time at the time of the crash? 3, yes. Why didn't defense subpoena the third sister? I heard that they tried and did it wrong, which again is on them if she doesn't show up, in my opinion. I don't know what you mean by confirmed GP left after ski patrol told her. That I believe is the story they've told on the defense side so far. All right. You guys are the best. I appreciate you so much. I'm out of here. You guys have a great night. Check out Runkle's stream and tell him I said what's up. Take it easy, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow night.